name is Canupa Gluha Mani. I'm from the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, and at my current time, I just experienced, something that was detrimental to the well-being of my mother, and so I'll, leave it at that until we go on.
Yes, so what happened to your mother recently?
Well, back in the 26th of January, my mother took ill on January 26, 2014. And during that time, my mom had some complications of, a slight understanding about pneumonia and different things. And it, kind of rocked the world a little bit because she was struggling to overcome that, and she did. Needless to say, a majority of the people didn't understand that kind of behavior that was going on with the condition of my mom. And I direct that understanding to the family.
And what happened next?
Well, what happened was that during the time when my mom was, in the hospital facing all these unhealthy predicaments, it was my family, my grandmother, and my sister, Carmen Martin Yellowpool, that took these understandings on at the discretion of their own, consciousness that they thought they could oversee the issues pertaining to my mother, when in fact it never did meet the requirement that they are supposed to be, utilizing to their own understanding to help improve my mother's, health. And so during, the time when she was in the hospital, before she faced all these other harder complications, the energy that my grandmother, Cecilia Little Moose Martin, produced is an unhealthy, energy, because my grandmother comes from the boarding school era. She is a product of how the Catholic upbringing tormented a lot of our native children, girls and boys. And so that abuse has played out in a real, circumstantial, manner at the discretion of my grandmother's well-being. And so lo and behold, my grandmother was just an abusive, person throughout her life. And so my mother feared that. And, in society doesn't understand that this type of measure happens because native people, before the colonists ever arrived here in 1492, lived in their own paradise without this kind of distortion of having, unhealthy energy levels towards a family member. We all cared for one another. We loved each other. And that was the pronunciation that we learned to, continue to show our understanding in existence. But in a modern sense of reality, like in 2014, we don't have a basic value system that can implement that type of love standards to care for one another.
So there was there was a difference in how, I guess you and your mother thought could best treat the illness versus what your grandmother and sister thought. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. See, because, if anybody in America takes illness, no matter what the sickness might be, if families have a positive energy that put that type of intent of promoting, a get well sooner, understanding of good faith, that individual that becomes that person that's in these health issue facilities can overcome that. Okay? But a majority of it today, people don't take that understanding very seriously because, it's all about control, okay? How America always, uses their own, personification to, control anything. I don't care. Whatever has life, the pronunciation of how Americans do it, they want to control and take that power source away from the people that are struggling to get well.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Yes, it does.
Yes, it's control versus a harmony with other elements.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so eventually she had passed, and that was on February 13th, 2014, correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
During the time, before my mother, passed on, there was an understanding between the family.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'll come at it this way, because they called us, meaning the people that was at the facility known as Rapid Regional Hospital, and it wasn't just the doctor people, it was the family in particular. So they wanted all the family members up there, and they were going to take this machine off my mother. In the first place, my grandmother and my sister should not have asked the facility, caregivers to put my mother on that machine.
Mm.
And see, because after a person, it doesn't matter what color creed you are, you get on these, scientific machines, you're better off, man, saying goodbye early if your voice pronunciation can, give you that ability to talk to somebody.
Mm.
Because that's what it does. Our bodies ain't known to be programmed to machines. And so I really, really am very insulted by how my grandmother and my sister, use that type of aspect to try to, step out in the open and really look at what they did to my mother.
So your understanding is that they kind of pressured your mother to accept that machine treatment.
Yes, because, certain doctors were telling them that this can improve her breathing, blah, blah, blah. No, it didn't. A gentleman by the name of Dr. Kerman, I think he was an Indonesian, and he understood the surrounding, environment of how people of color reacted different to the type of science that we're all in through the medical pronunciation. And so he left a voice message on my phone indicating when I forbid them to put my mother on a machine. And he said the next following day he called me after I left the hospital and stuff, because I was with my mom the whole time until my family stepped up and started getting out of proportion. And so Dr. Kerman called the next day and left a message that mom was doing much better, and he said you were right not to put her on the machine. And so the type of breathing mask that they had on her with this liquid device gave mom's stability to increase a lot better in the condition she was coming out of.
So to make sure I understand, at first there was discussion of machine, and neither you or your mother wanted that. Instead, you used a mask. You had the mask, and afterward her condition had improved. And then afterward, there was the pressure to put her on the machine. Is that
That's
correct?
Right.
I see.
Right. The machine that the mask breathing machine that helped mom increase her, body potential it was a nebulizer. But there was a missed medical thing that, helped mom's, lungs, prove more of accepting the oxygen flow between her heart and lungs and so forth.
Yes.
Start becoming more productive.
Yes.
Rather than, how my grandmother and my sister did it. So, lo and behold, when they put my mom through this breathing tube that went through her nose, clear down to her tummy area and her rectum area, that did it. That really took a toll and drained a lot of the, health out of my mother. And I was very alarmed at that because, my grandmother, when I was there, was rubbing my mother on the side where she had her stroke from. And being bedridden for so many years, it's uncomfortable. But my grandmother was squeezing my mom on her foot, and my mother would react saying, ow, 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 ow. And I had to tell, my grandma, hey, what are you doing? And grandmother looked at me, oh, I'm Roma. I said, no, don't do that. I don't want my mom screaming like that. No, she tried to rebel on. I said, no, don't do this. And so I raised my voice, so then my grandmother stopped and she said, I wish Carmen would hurry up and get here. And it's just the same type of mechanism that goes on. And so when my sister got there, my sister looks at me and she says, you know what's happening here? I said, yeah, you guys are trying to kill my mother. That's what's happening here. And from that time on, I never really appreciated that type of behavior with my grandmother and my sister, because the way I look at it as an activist, maybe even the system told them to do that, to try to stop me from continuing my work to help my people get out of dormancy. And, maybe they use my family to try to, stop that, because this is not the first time I've experienced stuff like this. In the past, all the stuff that I've ever done to help people, they did this to my mother. 3 or 4 years ago, prior to the time when I took over the Mills for the Hourly site in Porcupine, they dropped my mother. And they broke one of her legs. And so that was kind of like a sign to get at me, to throw me off the whole subject, trying to help our elders get, what was rightly theirs to improve, that mill for the elderly side. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. They remodeled the building that they have currently, and you don't remodel a condemned building.
She directly participated in the prayer vigil in the building during the occupation?
Mom, on the other hand, Mom used to eat at the older site of the Mills for the Elderly program in Porcupine.
Yes.
There was a big building they called the camp office, but it had a gymnasium in it. And they served the meals there because it had a cafeteria in it. And so my mom used to walk from her house. She had a log house sitting in Porcupine that was given to her by my late grandmother by the name of Lizzie Jackson. And she gave this log house to my mother. And so my mother lived there for a time, being before, she had this stroke. And, she used to walk to the Mills to the elderly side because, it fit her discretion because she was an elder. And, this kind of issues that we talk about when it comes into, the predicament that my mom encountered will show you that this is the way to bring out this, understanding to show that.
So she was not directly involved, but she was targeted anyway regarding the occupation?
Yeah. See, my mom, people don't know my mother, okay? And if I may, I need to interject something here because my mother, during the time before she got sick and ever encountered anything that was unhealthy, my mom was always active into whatever I did. When the white clay issues, when the late Ronnie Hardheart and Wally Black Elk were found murdered in the hamlet of White Clay, we started, protesting and marching into that town. And so my mother was capable of understanding what was happening here. So was my my brother Jonathan. He was alive then too, which is one of my mom's sons. So at that same time, we tried to show that type of improvement taking place. But my mom always told me to go on out there and help the people. Don't worry about me. That was her motto. She knew what her son was capable of doing. My mother had 3 siblings. My mother, her name was Yvonne Jane Martin, then her younger brother was born, and his name was Melvin Lewis Martin. And then their baby sister, which was Lima Rose Martin. And so these 3 children were my grandfather, Roy Stanislaus Martin's, 3 children, and Cecilia Moose Little Elk Martin. These were their said children.
How your mother raised you, and one of the most important things she's given to you is native knowledge of the Lakota language. Can you talk more about that with us?
Yes, my mother was very instrumental in my life. During, when she, had me as her child.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout them years, my mother's language to us was Lakota.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time when Mom gave me life, I stayed more or less into that pronunciation of utilizing my mom as the mother,
Mm-hmm.
which all children should be doing. So their mothers don't have to get up, and get caught into drugs and alcohol and domestic abuse with guys that, don't give a damn about that woman.
Mm-hmm.
So me, I utilized that aspect for my mom's condition as a mother. And lo and behold, my mother taught me so much, understanding that, she was my mom. There was nothing that I could say that my mother was discriminatory about. My mother loved her children.
Mm-hmm.
And she was that type of mother to give me that type of, compassion of her love. How she struggled, even though she was, targeted with that abuse by her family and many outsiders.
Mm-hmm.
And so that language that she also, put forth to give me the knowledge to obtain, I never ever took it for granted, because when Mom taught me something in Lakota, I kept my heart open so my ears can hear. And most of all, my mouth was shut. That was the real education, that our people should be getting back into, when our family's education comes from the teepee, when it's within your home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are there any other particular fond memories you have that you'd like to share with us? Times with your mother?
Yes, during the time when my mom gave me life, I experienced something real, astonishing with my mother. Back in 1971, my mother was part of this fishing derby that happened in the community and district where she was from, called Slim Butte. And at that time, there was two individuals that were well known on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation that, were modern-day fishermen, by using fishing tackle and those neo-modern fishing poles and so forth. And they had a fishing derby. And it was run by a gentleman by the name of Steve Jacobs, and the other one was Sunshine Janice. Both of these two individuals had passed on, but they put this fishing derby on in the district of Slim Butte along the White River. And so my mom, she gave it a shot, but my mom had a homemade fishing pole out of a cottonwood willow. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
That string tied up there with the sinker and hooks and so forth. And so Mom, I went fishing with her and my grandmother-in-law there. And the thing about it is, during 1971, before all this other heavy stuff had taken place, my mom loved to fish. My mom had the greatest patience. At sometimes, before all these fancy equipment came out to monitor fish and whatever, where they spawn and, where they are all at underneath the water, my mom had a different type of understanding the fish with. Because my grandfather taught her that the magic to catching a big fish was, spitting on your bait. And so, a lot of people think that it's a myth, but hey, it works, because even at the age of 54, I'm still doing that.
Spitting on the bait?
Yes, spitting on the bait, pulling it in, okay? And hey, it works, And so my mom, she had me as a young kid do that to her bait, and she threw it in.
Were you in the boat with her?
Say that again?
Were you in the boat with her during the fishing derby?
No, we weren't on a boat. We were along the river.
Ah, along the bank.
Okay?
Okay.
And off the bank, my mom had her line inside the river. So, here's my mom having all this patience, and up the creek, both sides, from Janice Creek down to White River's first bridge. Children and adults were on either side. They had fancy fishing equipment and whatnot. Here's Mom with her homemade fishing pole.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, my mom's line jerked so tight that she said, "Son, help me."
Mm-hmm.
And she started pulling on it, and I came over to aid my mother. And man, that line was pulling so tight that there was, something at the end real heavy. And so when I'd help her pull, my mom would take her right arm and, start twisting the twine back on the cottonwood pole, and I'd pull again, and she'd do it again.
Mm.
And just within about, I don't know, I'd say maybe about a foot and a half above where we can see the sinker, the size of the head of that catfish, man, was huge.
Mm.
And I lost my balance. And I slipped into the river, and my feet landed in this black mud. And his mom said, she was like, "Oh, my son fell in." But I managed to get out and watch it. I told Mom, "Just keep going, keep going." And people were all excited watching it. So Mom would pull it again, and I'd help her again. And finally, the head of the catfish came up out of the river, and man, I looked at him, he was so huge. So I had to use my hands, and on the side of the catfish's head, there's some long fins, and they got like needles on them.
Mm.
Very sharp. So I had to get right behind him and push it up. And I said that guy was well over 22 inches long.
Wow.
And
Wow.
that was my mom's record fish that she ever caught out of the White River in 1971. And she won a certificate and a blue ribbon at $25. Back in the 70s, $25 was $25. Was a lot of money.
Right.
So that was a great prize and a great, victory for my mother. I was very pleased and honored to talk about that story during her passing.
Mm.
She also, attended a yearly process, Bible camp in Huron, South Dakota every summer, just before spring she'd leave.
Mm.
And that was the time Mom loved to go out and take the time. And what I related from that was Mom, when she went on this Bible camp, to me, my understanding was it was to get away from the abuse.
Mm.
And that's where my mom also seen other Native families out there, like the Coleman family and the White Bull family would have came, the Standing Out family, and many other Native families would go.
Right.
And so my mom would go there. Her good friend at that time, well, she had two of them. And, they all went with my mother over there.
Mm-hmm.
There was a grandmother by the name of Hattie Running Hawk, and the other one was my grandmother, Mary Hand. Her real name, her real name was Miriam White Cowpure. And she married Floyd Hand Sr., and that was my grandmother. That was my mom's aunt. Mm-hmm. So my mom ran around with those two women when summer camp came. But my mom grew up with three special women where my mom was called, and the other three women, they would call them the Fabulous Four. My mother and her three friends were Christina Kilsmall, Christina King, and my Aunt Pearl Dixon. And each one of them, had a role to play as young girls in their time and era. It was such a beautiful thing because my mom, God rest her soul, that when she was on Earth, she would make pin cushions out of any type of, scrap material she could find. She would make little mice, little horses, little vegetables and fruits. Those were her pin cushions. And what she would do is sell them to help provide, for her said children. My mom had 5 children. My brother Donovan passed away. And that was the first death that my mother ever encountered out of her siblings, was my brother Donovan. Then which led to my brother John, and then the passing of my mother. And so, but Mom was such a tremendous woman. And, I was sharing this understanding with, a few other colleagues of mine, and my wife Nancy, she knows my mom completely. What I'm telling you is so, extraordinary that Mom even knew how to make you laugh even though you were uncomfortable. If you had a day in your life that you felt like it was a miserable day and you felt like doing something idiotic, well, Mom would take that energy and replenish it with something good. And I mean, I don't know how she did it, but she was just gifted that way. And I can remember the time when my mom was up at that Vista nursing home, and we went to go see her. I and my wife Nancy and my son, and we all went into her room, and then my little brother was with us too, my baby brother Calvin. And so we were all sitting in Mom's room, and one of the nurse guys went by, and I believe his name was Fred. But Mom nicknamed these people. So this gentleman named Fred was in another room over, and he was reading off the menu for the evening to the other recipients that were, part of the nursing home in Bella Vista.
Right.
And so when she heard, because Mom loved to eat chips with, cold sandwiches or even hamburger sandwiches. So when she heard that, it was, here we are sitting there talking to Mom, and all of a sudden, if you ever watched Fred Flintstone, that when he worked at that Granite, Rock Corporation, that guy would say that, hollering that, Flintstone! Well, here's Mom. Mom sitting in her room, and all of a sudden, she hollered that. She said, Flintstone, get over here! That guy, man, that cracked me up. But she made people like that because of their name.
Right.
He came in with the menu and read it to Mom, and that was a blast. I couldn't get over that. She said, excuse me. She said, Flintstone, what's on the evening menu? And, he explained it to her. She said, okay, I want that one. And so she checked it off. She said, okay, Mom, we'll see you later. He said, okay, now go on, you go play. Mom said it. But it was just her nature. And people loved her so much, That's just the way she was. She was very outgoing, and, she was, very easy to, get involved in anything. And one of the things that, was very, helpful for my mom at this nursing home was she loved to play bingo. Oh, man, she can get down. See, that's the type of stories in life that my family don't want to talk about because they never knew my mother. And I have. I've been there, throughout the years in my time, even the stints when I was in prison after taking over, the Red Cross building and doing that to law enforcement. I stayed close to my mother, even with the help of my grandfather before he passed on. And, I have nothing to hide, nothing to, say behind the world that, my mother was a bad woman or anything. No. My mother was the best mother any family should have. My mom really was a mother to a lot of her own siblings as children. She raised my little brother, Duane Martin Jr. She raised my little sister, Melanie, who passed on. Both Wayne and my little sister, Melanie, passed on. And she raised them. Because, their parents were under the influence of alcohol. That's, to this godforsaken day in 2014, they're still drunk.
Oh, that's
sad.
terrible.
That type of behavior still plays out in every family's home.
Yeah.
And when loved ones like Mom pass on, these guys all put it off on a different... See, this is the thing that America needs to understand. When you take the love that is valued amongst any person, I don't give a shit, male or female, grandma and grandpa, it doesn't matter. Son or daughter, mom or dad, aunt or uncle, it doesn't matter. If you take that love and you abuse it with the type of mentality that America inflicts on people, you are going to destroy that individual. Because that individual is going to become very, explicit with that pronunciation of fear. And when you show your appearance, that person will get silent.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that in my mother's cases against my own grandmother, my sister, and my mother's siblings,
Mm-hmm.
Uncle Malvin and my Aunt Lima. And they don't know how to take the opportunity to stay and, accumulate issues with mother and talk with her and visit.
Mm-hmm.
Show that type of pronunciation of love that you love that individual.
Mm-hmm.
No, they would go and bring small gifts and take off because their life was invested upon alcohol and drugs. That's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
In a modern setting. That's what they want.
Mm-hmm.
They'll never take that opportunity to safeguard the issue. And me, on the other hand, even though I didn't have it, I was there for my mother. But the sad thing about it was that America finally saw the truth, how messed up my family was when my mother was released from that machine and she struggled to stay alive. And the doctors and nurses seen this behavior that came about from my family. And when my namesake got there, my son picked up where I left off, they saw a whole different energy, and my son can describe that on his own. Even the doctors told him. We never saw that with that other family. But you got here, and all of a sudden your grandmother starts trying to fight and move and roll her eyes around, and she's grasping to say something. I mean, that's how love is that Mom, bestowed upon me. God rest her soul. I'm sorry that I couldn't be there with my mother. My family signed complaints against me. I mean, this is unhuman. America, this is the type of fault that I will continue to come at you with. And throughout my activism, I'm going to continue to push that understanding of what you have done in your genocidal, heinous behavior, because you are destroying our people within their own sacred realm. And that's called love. My grandfather once told me, he said, when you remove a people from the forest, the people from the forest becomes unknown. And what becomes unknown, you want to destroy them. My grandfather Roy was right, because he wasn't raised in school. He was raised by his grandparents and his parents that lived nomadically. Now, we're talking, just before the beginning of the 1900s.
The traditional Lakota style, right?
Yes, and his parents were born in the late 1800s, and their parents were born in the early 1800s. And I can trace my blood genes clear down to 1799. That's kind of remarkable for most people. They can't even go as far as the county line. But for me, that's how far back I can go. I have so much, history of how my family have, originated their behavior, which led to, where we're at today. My mother enjoyed my singing, because when I started my drum group called the Four Nation Singers, my mom came to all my powwows. That was the type, but I was a singer all my life. I got the bird spirit. I took the life of a robin in my early ages, and that's how I became the singer. My grandfather had to explain that to me. But when I encountered the singing understanding, I never knew until my grandfather told me that when my grandpa used to sing at the drum, when my mom was pregnant with me, my mom would go to the powwow with grandpa. And so she would sit next to my grandfather while he's singing with all the old men, and that sound effect from the drum would tremble my mom's tummy when I was, baking in there. And so that's, that's a real beautiful story what my grandpa told me about that. And I became that singer that most people don't understand, because when I sing for people. I don't ask for money. I don't ask for that kind of stuff. I'm not high on alcohol or drugs to produce my song. This is all natural. It's the way it's supposed to. But today we are faced with so much, discrepancies of this unhealthy dilemma that get worried of what circumstance is going to be, targeted at that individual to do what he's supposed to do in a free pronunciation.
Right.
And that's what my mother taught us. On March 13th, I'm putting on a farewell celebration in honor of my mom. I want to feed the people. And before I get off the air, I want to thank you, Daya, for being there for my mother, helping me get these pictures, making the trip to Rapid City and taking care of my mom's personal stuff and getting the hot springs. I want to say a shout out to you, Nancy Fleming, Stephen Muse, Dr. Ed Maloney, James Moran, Jim Swan, my brother Louis, my children for being there for their grandmother in her time of need, the staff in Rapid Regional Hospital, the staff down in Castle Manor, the staff in Bella Vista that knew my mother, many other people that called and made, condolences to me. I want to thank my Aunt Elizabeth, my Aunt Wilma Thin Elk, Elizabeth Youngberg, my auntie, Mary Felicia, Aunt Bernice Whitehawk, Marvin Youngdog, Uncle Floyd Hand. The list goes on, man. All these people that believed in me. Renee Mills, these people, P.O. Wilkins, all these people that send their condolences of love for being strong in my need, and at that time, when my mother, left me. And doing all this tremendous work for helping my people is what's beneficial, because without these people, that I've just mentioned, like Nancy and Pia and Dr. Ed Maloney and Hill Charleston, and, the list goes on and on. I would never made it through all this without them. And then thanks to you for being there too, little sis. Even my sister Naomi Archer, all the people that, understand what I'm going through, even the Nohart family, Daryl Nohart and his family. I know they had a loss in their family of a loved one that his wife's going to be attending back in Minnesota. And my condolences go out to them. I'm just, a proud grandfather to my son, who just had a little girl, and she's named after my mother. Her name is Jane.
I see.
It's a blessing. So, with all you guys being in my corner and for sending, donations to help me with gas and getting to and from, and also a shout out goes out to my brother Thunderwolf out in California. I mean, that man, and my brother Tobias down in Kansas City, and my little brother Moses and Earl, my Strongheart guys. I want to say I love you guys for being there in my time of need too. Without you guys being on board, and Carlin Red Blanket, Adrian Medicine Horse, Dalbert High Hawk, Lil Duane, all you guys that are in Strongheart, man, thank you. Pay attention to what's coming up in March. It's a farewell celebration in honor of my mother, and I'm going to view all her pictures of all the happiness and smiles that she showed. And I'm just going through a lot of my stuff, just finding pictures of moms, I mean, she's the type of woman that put a smile on her face. Like I said, you could go through the ups and downs, and you needed something to bring it up. Yvonne Jane Martin would put that smile on her face, take away all that, man. That's just how mom was. And I wanted to honor her continuously, and I don't think I'll ever, get enough of doing that, because without her in my life, I don't think I would ever become the kind of person I am to love people. All you that I mentioned on tonight's radio show and on this interview are my family. And if anything should ever happen to me, all I want you people to do is keep me in your memory and do me one favor. Show up wherever I'm at and bury me wherever I'm at, but let the music be played between powwow and heavy metal, because that's what I love. I love playing guitar. I love my heavy metal. I mean, God, I just, even at the age of 54, I still listen to it, I mean, most people think that, to me, when I encountered heavy metal, and me and my mom used to jam it a lot, Now, I know some of the songs me and my mom used to harmonize together.
Oh, wow.
Heavy metal was the type of music that gave me the joy because it was talking about how society was messed up and how the system was destroying it. And a lot of these heavy metal bands were even barred from performing some of their great songs. And they're tremendous because it's directed at the government, how messed up they are when they take that power and control and try to neutralize and destroy its people. But once again, in closing, I thank all of you, even the animals. I thank them for being in my mom's corner because there was a Louis Llama that went a single at my friend's request, and I went over there with him, and we took that llama. So my mom got to touch it before. And we had to take him on, man. But Louis the Llama was the type of guy that, he loved to be felt by people. And when I talked to my friend Doug to bring him over, we did. And, that just really inspired my mom. And I was honored to take that picture while she was touching him. And, thanks to John Thune, too, because my family don't even know my mother's a celebrity. She's posing with a United States senator. Those are terrible memories that, I shared with my mom. And many thanks to Nancy Fleming for all she did for being in my mom's corner. Because she recorded parts of my mother's life as her only daughter-in-law that put my mother first. I mean, my mother knew her. She cried for her when, times got tough. And she always wanted Nancy to be there no matter what the understanding was. And, I just can't get over how much she participated in my mom's life, no matter what it was. When we had to face the evil pronunciation of what they did to my mother through medication and whatnot, Nancy was there. My hats go off to her because that was the daughter-in-law my mother, had during the time when she was still on earth. And, I just wanted to say all that to all them guys and you and many others that have been there for me and the families that I mentioned. If it wasn't for you guys, my mom wouldn't have carried it on. And again, thanks to all of you that, played some kind of part in my mom's life. And I look forward to do this again on, March 13th when I, put this farewell celebration and dinner on in honor of mother's departure.